During my childhood days, as far as I know, and I'm very certain that there were no organized children's clubs. Even baseball games were only played for fun by the older boys. There were no scout groups either for boys or girls, as there are now. Scouting was in its infancy and hadn't as yet spread throughout our country. There were 4-H clubs for the children, but as far as I know, even that wasn't organized in our town, Salem, when I was a child. For children's entertainment, these were not existent. There was only what the kids thought of by themselves and the games they played. Compared to today's activities for children, we had none. Nowadays, there are baseball games starting with the little pee-wee leagues to advanced American Legion leagues and so forth, absorbing children from ages 6 or 7 right up through the teenage years, then into high school and college. Also, there is soccer being played these days the same way from early years as young as 5. We had none of this, but we managed to grow up into healthy individuals, both in mind and body. Everyone wanted to become someone and tried his or her best in his own way to attain a higher goal. I may add that since there were none of these types of activities, we still had our games and played them vigorously. The kids would be too tired at night to even think that they were missing something. It wasn't until we were grown that we realized that we wanted to go out to mingle. The little girls visited one another, learned to knit and crochet from one another, also from their mothers, and so forth. The boys learned to make whistles from certain type of thin branches from certain trees, of course. They had to debark the thin branch carefully not to ruin the bark, and then cut little holes to make the sounds. They were very clever and created good flutes. They could even play tunes on them. Now most of the boys had harmonicas, which they could play real well, learning by themselves. We had phonographs from which they learned the tunes. Also, they learned the songs we sang at school, mostly patriotic ones. Yankee Doodle was a favorite one, and of course, Jingle Bells was the easy one. My dad played the violin, also the organ, all by ear. I don't know where we got it, but we did have an old organ. How I wished I could have taken lessons to learn to play it. I dabbled a little with it on my own, but that was all. There was no one in town to teach music as far as I knew. You must remember, we only had about 800 people in the whole town when I was growing up. Now and then, we visited friends across town, and that would be a whole day's journey, starting in the early morning after chores were done and returning home to do the nightly chores. All the animals had to be tended to, so you see, we were a busy, busy bunch. When there was a wedding of a friend's son or daughter, we all went. No fancy doings. The reception was always in the home of the bride. Usually the dancing was done in a shed or a garage near the house. There was plenty of wholesome food to eat and plenty to drink. Most of the men drank, but we kids were only amused at the antics of the parents. In fact, I was surprised the first time I saw my father ossified. I had never seen anyone under the influence of liquor before. I was perhaps 9 or 10, maybe 11. I didn't know what had happened. You see, we never had liquor in our house except brandy for emergencies. We had cider made from our own apples. Nevertheless, we did enjoy a party like that as a family, and only very rarely. There were very few weddings when I was a child, at least out in the country where I lived. I knew something was wrong when my father took a piece of wedding cake from his pocket. He crushed it into little crumbs and handed it to me to eat, laughing as loud as he could at the predicament. Of course, I was aghast and even frightened.
My parents, as other parents then, were very strict anyway. Sometimes I wonder how it was that we lived through such simple, down-to-earth only lives. But we did.